Hello and welcome to episode 8 in this series of videos where I'm sharing my journey from corporate life to running my own business, and some of the things that have happened, some of the things that I've learnt, and I'm sharing all of this in the hope that it will help you if you're looking to make your own personal change, maybe looking to start your own business. I'm not sure what, but it may be that some of the information contained in here is useful to you. Right, okay, so I'm quite excited, and it may not look like it, this is my normal face, but I'm excited for two reasons. One is I've invested in a proper light to record these videos because I was having a bit of a problem, always trying to get the right lighting depending on when it was I was recording the videos, and I'd got all sorts of contraptions, different positions, and I'd got lamps that were sort of like up on tables that were up on top of other tables, just trying to get the lighting balance right, and I was wasting far too much time doing that. So I've invested in this really fancy circular light that you can't see, that I can, that basically floods the right amount of light, and the phone sits in the middle to record the video. So if that's something that you struggle with as well, mine was about £100 or so on Amazon, and it came with, the second reason I'm excited, this little dongle here, that when you pair it with your phone means that you can just press a button and it starts recording, rather than the old-fashioned way of leaning forward and starting it and then having to sit and compose yourself and edit that bit out of the video. So yes, that's all great fun for me, irrelevant for the content of the video, but just thought I'd share that with you. So what I promised to talk about this time, and I am going to talk about this time, is a few things that happened about 6 months into running my business. And there were three things in particular. Two I'm going to talk about, one is a bit more confidential. But there were these things about 6 months in, any one of which could have completely derailed my business. And basically I'm going to talk to you about those, and what I learned from them and how I overcame them, because obviously I did, because I still have my business a year and a half later. But before I do that, I sort of have to go back probably about 15 years into my corporate career. And the reason I have to go back is because I learned a very, very valuable lesson. I was I think the correct term at the time was network manager or operations manager. I looked after all of the IT for a company that I was working for. And one morning came into work bright and early, and one of the critical networks had a problem overnight and was busy rebuilding itself. This won't make a lot of sense to any sort of younger generation viewers, but they were Novell file servers and they'd corrupted and they were rebuilding from the mirror. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, and didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. But anyway, I digress. So basically, come in first thing in the morning, server's rebuilding itself, have to stop people getting in, and we're down in the basement, there's people all over the building, and not quite sure what to do. Quick look in the instruction book, and actually there's a command that says disable login, stops all users from logging onto the network. And I thought, it's ideal. So type disable login, pressed enter, and lo and behold, no one could get in, the servers could run, we could communicate to people that there was this problem, and we would just re-enable login when everything had finished. So that's what happened. It was all building nicely, all finished. And then it came time to sort of get everything back up and running again. So I type enable login, nothing happened because login was disabled. So I couldn't log in, and the moment of panic, this momentary thought that, oh my God, this is the most critical system in the company, and I've prevented any of us from ever getting into it again. This thought went into my mind, and I think most of the colour drained from my face, and it was just sort of like a moment. And a guy who worked for me at the time, junior guy, basically just walked away, picked up the instruction book, manual, had a read through, and came back and said, you need to type this, and this will re-enable all the logins for everybody. And it did. And I was incredibly relieved. I can't tell you how relieved I was. But the lesson I've always taken from that, and the lesson I've shared many times with people over the years, is there is always a solution. Whatever the problem you think you've got, there is more than likely a really simple, straightforward solution. You've just got to find it. And I link this together with a lot of my own thoughts and my own experiences at the time of things that I'd been through. And it was a fairly pivotal moment that helped cement in my mind this idea that there is always a solution. So whenever I'm confronted with a problem now, whatever it might be, and yeah, I'm not some Zen master. I'm not sort of super calm about it, because obviously, you do worry about things. But what goes off in the back of my mind is there is a solution to this. You just don't know what it is yet. And as I say, that's held me in good stead all the way through my career. And so fast forward the 15 or so years, it's probably even longer than that. It's probably close to 20. Oh, actually, no, it's probably close to 25, which is now really depressing me. But anyway, so fast forward, and 6 months into my business, and 3 things went wrong pretty much all at the same time. One of them was the supplier of the metal rings, who had taken me ages to find and had worked with me and come up with these lovely metal rings that we use inside the notebooks. He basically decided to up sticks and sell his business and have nothing to do with it anymore and close his business down. And that was a sort of, oh, right, okay, well, I need rings for my business, and the guy who's been doing them all for me at a really good price has now shut down. What am I going to do? But rather than going to a tailspin, the thought that went through my mind was obviously, well, there is a solution. And within a few days, it presented itself, and I found an alternate supplier who's turned out to be better, who's turned out to be more local, and who's turned out to do just as good a job as the first guys. And so, again, I'd had this thing reinforced in me that, there is always a solution. And then the second problem that I'm going to talk about, so the third one, nothing spectacular, it's just it's not something I particularly want to share. But the third problem that I had was the paper that's inside our notebooks. I pride myself on it. It's very fountain pen friendly. It's lovely to write on. I'd spent a lot of time finding just the right paper for the notebooks, and I'd been using it for about a year before the launch, using it myself, testing it, and then all the way through the launch. And it was lovely, and we were getting a lot of compliments on it, and I was trying to build the credibility of the notebooks within the fountain pen community, and it was all working. And then I'd run my stocks of paper down quite low, nothing unusual in that, because the company that I was buying it from, they delivered within 24 hours, so no particular issue. And I just put my paper order in as usual. I think it was about the 5th order I'd put in. Paper turned up, and I opened the boxes and looked at it and immediately knew something wasn't the same. Now, I've got no great background in paper, but when you're handling hundreds and thousands of these sheets of this paper every day, you get a fairly good idea of and feeling for the paper, and I could immediately tell something wasn't right. And I did my usual test, as I did with every batch, and I just wrote on it with a fountain pen, and just disaster. It ghosted, it feathered, it blotched through on the paper, and it was sort of like a moment, sort of, if there's one thing you need for a notebook, it's paper, and if it's one thing you need for a fountain pen friendly notebook, it's fountain pen friendly paper. And so basically, I was in this situation where my paper stocks had dwindled, the new stuff was no good. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on, and it was quite a scary moment because I got orders I needed to fulfill fairly soon. And it was, I got this thing going through my mind which said, there is always a solution. So I just started, contacted the company. I just assumed that they sent me the wrong paper. So I spoke to them, explained the problem. Yep, okay, they asked me to send some samples in. I showed them, I sent them in, and it's like, oh yeah, it must have just been a bad batch. So they sent me a different batch of paper, sent it through. I looked at it and knew that it still wasn't right. And what transpired was that back at the mill in another country where they made the paper, they'd somehow changed the formulation, they'd changed something that they did within the process. No one actually knows, but that paper stopped behaving in the way that it should behave. And because it wasn't specifically sold as fountain pen, sort of writing paper, that wasn't a test that they did. It still performed for all of the other uses it was supposed to have. It was just this use I was using it for, it no longer did. And actually it was starting to get a little bit fraught at this point, because my stocks were really running low. I was down to maybe 1 or 2 boxes, which weren't going to last more than a week. It had taken me a long time to find this paper, and I was, really quite sort of concerned. But what I did do was I got back in touch with the company again, explained the situation. I drove to their offices to talk about the situation with them. We did a bit of investigating. We found that actually there was a batch. There was a few hundred. Can't remember, maybe 1,000 sheets, large sheets of this paper that from one of my previous orders that was still left in the warehouse. So they cut that up for me, and that gave me sort of like a little bit of short-term grace, because it meant that my stocks were back up to 8 or 10 boxes, whilst I then started the investigation process to find a new type of paper to use in the notebooks. And that process took a few weeks, and is, let's say not is always the way, but as I find happens often, I would never have chosen to change away from that original paper, but in the end, I'm so glad I did, because I then found a paper that I'd not considered before that behaved just as well, probably a little better with fountain pens than my original paper. It was now made in a paper stock that was made in Britain, as opposed to one that was made in Europe, which fits with the whole of the William Hanna brand even better. And it was a nicer thickness. So what came out of that particular situation was, the fact that I've ended up with a better paper that's better suited to my brand. And this then does come back to reinforce that idea that there is always a solution. Some solutions might take a lot longer than others to find out. Some of them will leave you with the same situation. Some of them will improve things. But ultimately, there is always a solution. And that's the message that I'm clumsily banging home, is that, and that's what I want you to take away from this video, is that, there are going to be setbacks in anything that you do. It could be in your corporate career, it could be in your own business, it could be in a personal project, I don't know, to get fitter or have a little side hustle and a side business of your own. There are going to be setbacks, and my advice, my thoughts on it is just don't give up, is not to accept, whatever the problem, however big it is, however much impact you believe it will have in your business, don't give up. Just look for the solution, because there is one. And, it might take you a day, a week, a month, a couple of months to find it, but there will be one. And the other thing that I learned is, believe that their issues will occur. And know that issues will occur, and don't leave yourself exposed. The biggest problem with my paper situation wasn't that the paper had stopped working, because I knew there would be other papers that were just as suitable for use in my notebooks. I knew there was a solution. The problem I'd given myself was that I'd let my stocks run down so low, basically just by not applying good common sense and thinking, what if there was a problem with that paper? So I'd let my stocks run down so low that it was going to take a time to find a solution, and I hadn't given myself enough contingency. So what I've done since then with all aspects of my business, I thought I was quite resilient before because of my background in IT and systems, but I'm super resilient now, and I've got all sorts of thresholds of different things, of different products and different bits that are critical to the business, and I know, I don't let myself get down below these safety thresholds that I've built. So they're the two things. The one is that there is always a solution. So don't give up. You will always find a way through it. And number two is learn from those issues and take the experience that they give you and improve things afterwards so that you don't get caught out in the same way again. So yes, so there we go. That's this week's video. I hope it's of use to you. I hope it gives you some insight into the sort of things you need to consider if you're making your own change. If it's of value to you, please like it, or sort of give me a comment. If there's something you'd like to know, something you'd like me to talk about in a future video, again, leave that in the comments. And if you think the video is of use to someone else, someone who's maybe going through this or is thinking about going through this, then please send them this way, and hopefully they'll get some value from it. So I think I'm going to wind off there. I'll be back next week. I can't remember what I was planning to talk about next week, but it will be following the theme through. I hope to record a little random thought video as well, at least in between. And the one problem I've realised with this brilliant light is when I look away, all I can see is that really sort of black circle in your vision where you've been looking at a light. So I'm going to have a black circle in my vision, I think, for the next 10 or 15 minutes as everything calms down. But it's so much better having this and rather than the jerry-rigged solution I had before. But anyway, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon. And I'm going to press my little button.